Hey writers, you're listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we bring you insights and inspiration for growing your self-publishing business. I'm Joni DiPlacido, and I work on the business team at KWL.
And I'm Stephanie McGrath, the Publisher Operations Specialist at Kobo Writing Life.
This week we talked to Jill Shalvis, who's a very well-known romance writer. She's been in the industry for 20 years.
And she's published, at this point in time, over 100 novels, and we spoke to her about how she stays motivated this far into her career and how she still has ideas for new stories. So please keep listening. Jill, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
This may be a bold statement, but I think you're probably one of the most well-known romance writers, I want to say, prolific writers.
Yeah. I don't know if that's true, but I'm happy to have you tell me so.
I will tell. Well, given you've written 100 books, which this stat is probably old by now. But before we get into it, I just want you to tell our listeners a bit about yourself.
Well, I think the 100 books is actually true. I think that happened last year, which means, or maybe the year before. I think I'm at 104, 105 now. And that sounds more impressive than it is. I started in category romance. Those are shorter and faster to write. And I've moved on to single title romance, which are bigger stories, and even women's fiction now too. And those are even bigger still. So they're taking me longer to write now. So it won't be speeding up to 200 time soon.
So given that your writing has changed and your books have changed over the years, what is your writing process like?
Well, it always looks the same no matter what I'm writing. It involves getting up, putting my slippers on, going out to my deck, and writing for the day. And with the dogs at my feet and, coffee or frosted flakes or whatever, and getting some pages down before the house gets moving is always important. For me, I'm the most creative in the morning. And if I miss that opportunity, I can't seem to catch the creativity again. I try, but it's no good. The morning is best for me. And then I work all day until people start coming home and making noise. And then I give it up until the next day.
That sounds idyllic, sitting on your porch.
Yes, it is. I mean, it's not always the porch. Sometimes, I go to the lake or the river, or to the cliff. If you walk through our backyard, about 100 yards, you come to a cliff about 300 feet high, and down below it is the river. And so it's a really cool place to sit and write and be creative.
And if you need a visual of this, you need to check out her Instagram.
Yes, Instagram and Facebook. I post a lot of pictures. I'm ADHD. I'm not medicated. So I find that I need to move around. I cannot sit at a desk. A desk really kills me. So I don't have an office. I just have a laptop and I migrate to wherever the weather is the best. If it's really cold, I have to stay inside, but I try not to.
A lot of the authors we've talked to have talked about dictating their novels and walking around saying what's going on in their novel. Is that something you've ever tried?
It's fascinating to me. And I have close friends who do that as well. And I'm so envious because when I try to dictate, the thing can't understand me and it comes out gibberish.
Oh.
It ends up being so much more work than it's worth. But I hope that I can train, supposedly you keep doing it and you train yourself and your program. And that would be ideal, would be to dictate all the stories.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, it sounds like it takes a lot of practice though. Everyone who we've spoken to said it started out being frustrating.
Yeah. So, a lot of typos that way. But like I said, I hope to get to it because that seems like it'd be perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How has publishing landscape changed since you first started writing?
I'm a dinosaur. So when I started, there wasn't, this indie market and there wasn't really even a digital market.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very different. If readers didn't find you on the shelves, it wasn't always easy to be found at all. And now you don't need a publisher. You don't need to go the traditional route. And so I can't even imagine what it would be like to start now, but I would think it'd be more fascinating and more fun because you're not competing, trying to get into a publisher. You're actually writing your work and putting it out yourself. That's pretty attractive. For me, however, I love being in print. I love going to Walmart and to Target and to Barnes & Noble and seeing my books on the shelf. So I kind of try to straddle both worlds so I can still have print. That just happens to be important to me.
And what about your readers? Do you notice, do they prefer print or digital, or is it a bit of both?
It's interesting because it was always print and then digital came along and digital readers found me. And so now it's half and half, I think, really for me. So that's why I try to straddle both worlds. I try to keep prices a certain way for the digital readers and I try to keep my books out on the shelf for the print readers. And I find I have both.
Is that something you'd recommend? You mentioned authors just starting out today. Would you recommend that they try straddling both worlds and go print and digital?
For me, it's been the way to go. I was lucky enough to have a traditional deal and to have a publisher interested in me. And those deals are hard to find now, and they're not for everybody. They're restricting, and there's a different set of rules. And so I think it depends on what kind of a person you are and how much talent you have. To be an indie writer, you're basically running an empire, and that takes a lot of talent and a lot of work. And I really just want to write. So for me, staying firmly in the traditional world while dabbling in indie world is fun, and it keeps me creative, and I enjoy every piece of it. If I was solely indie, for me, that wouldn't work out, because you have to do covers, you have to, there's everything that is on your plate.
Absolutely.
So I think there's a lot of people who have the talent, who have a marketing background, who can make that indie world work for them. That just doesn't happen to be me. I guess the biggest thing I want to say is, if you're a writer, is to follow your path. Everyone's path is different, and you have to follow where your talents lead.
Absolutely.
Well, you've straddled both worlds, print and ebook. But do you find that there's some tips that you think everyone can benefit from, and that you've held true during your publishing years?
You mean like writing tips?
Yeah. Or business tips, or career tips?
Well, several. I think as far as the writing tip would be to always, always put out your best work, not to rush something that's not been through a couple of drafts. Mm-hmm. You don't want to rush that, because once the readers read something that maybe isn't 100% finished, then they'll be less likely to pick you up again next time. So I think the best thing a writer can do is sit their butt in the chair and write and write and write and rewrite until it's perfect. As for marketing or business tips, you have to be professional no matter what. Memories are long, the industry is small, and there's no place for a diva. So I think you should know that going in, and just be as professional as you can, even though maybe you're at home writing in your pajamas and your bunny slippers on the deck.
Yeah. How do you navigate the business side of publishing and the marketing and the social media aspect, given that you prefer to focus mainly on writing?
Well, for me, that was hard at first. Like I said, I am a dinosaur, so I've been doing this since before there was really social media.
What year did you first publish? I just want to get it on record.
1998. So I really have been in there for 20 years.
Seen it all.
Seen it all, done it all. And at first, I started with a blog. Before there was a bunch of social media, before Instagram, before Twitter, all that, I was blogging. And I was telling stories about myself. I'm a misplaced city girl. I grew up in LA, and now I live in the mountains with bears and porcupines and snow. I mean, things that this LA girl never saw, never had to deal with. I didn't know anything about living in an atmosphere like this. And so I started a blog. Writing is a lonely business. At least it was before there was social media. And there was your town of one, basically. You don't go to an office every day. You don't see people. And so I would blog about my adventures of writing in the mountains, and people started to show up, and I thought, oh, this is cool. I'm not alone anymore. So as social media grew, I already knew I liked it. It was a natural fit for me. I'm a photographer too, and I love to take pictures, and I just love to tell silly stories about, small towns. I don't mean to make fun of small towns, but I live in one now, and to me, everything that happens is true and funny and a cliche all at the same time. So I like to, tell about it. And so I'm just lucky enough that as I'm tweeting these things or Instagramming pictures, that I'm also doing it in the same voice that I write. So for me, it's worked out really well. It's been a natural fit to do social media, because people can see my posts, think, oh, maybe she's funny, or maybe she moved me, and then they can pick up a book and it's in the same tone. Mm-hmm. So I've been very lucky navigating this business side of things like Twitter and Instagram, because it's given me readers, and I'm not sure that's always true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, I feel like the way you approach it, and just funny things, and people can relate to stuff that it's an open, what's the word I'm trying to...
That authentic voice.
Yeah, exactly.
On social media, and it just...
Well, I appreciate that. And it's true. I mean, right before we set up, when I thought I was going to be on video, I had the camera, I had my laptop strategically placed on top of a planter so that you could see my face because the chair is low. And I was getting it, I was pushing it, so it was just perfect. And then bee flew by me, and I threw the laptop and I threw the planter in. So, if you could have been on camera only 2 seconds before you picked up.
I know.
You would have seen everything.
Next time.
And those are the kind of things that I put on social media. And so for me, social media isn't necessarily post about your book, post about your book, post about your book. It's actually post about me as a person, and hope that I interest you enough to pick up a book.
Yeah, I don't think readers want to be bombarded with ads when they open social either. I think that they want what you're giving them.
What's
Yeah,
like,
it works.
I'm always a little nosy. I'm like, what's their life like?
Me too. I'm a nosy person,
Yeah.
very nosy. So I love to know the stuff behind the scenes.
So that's your community with your readers. What about other authors? Do you engage with the author community much? Do you have author friends or network?
Yeah, I do have an author friends / network, and it's genuine. We all really care about each other. We care about each other's books. We try to push each other's books when possible. But again, that's tricky because you're already holding back from pushing your own books, and you don't want to saturate them and make them go away. However, I think readers do like hearing whose author's friends with who and what those friends' books are. And so we do cross promote as often as possible and do giveaways and stuff like that as often as we think the readers can tolerate without being annoyed.
How important do you think that is, that sense of community? As you said, it's a very solitary career.
It is a solitary career. And so I think it's vital to have if you're an author, to have author friends that you can trust and that you can throw ideas by, and not just writing ideas, but social media ideas, or just keep up to date so that you know what's happening in the industry and who's doing what. And I've never been one to write to the market. In fact, I've made a career by not writing to the market. I was writing contemporary small town before it was cool, and I was writing rom-com before it was cool. And I just think that the biggest thing you can do is be authentic, and be authentic with the friends that you post about, and it will convert to readers.
So how did you forge these friendships? Because as we both come from conferences, it can be kind of intimidating reaching out to an author and like wanting to be their friend, or like wanting to learn business tips.
Introverts.
But I'm a huge introvert, and people always laugh because on social media they call me out on that. No, there's no way you're an introvert, but I am actually very introverted. I can say these things and show you pictures of my life online because we're not face to face. So when you get me in this kind of situation, I feel shy. If you get me in a conference situation, I will hide out in my room unless I have a place I have to be. So the itinerary is always very important. And I think that I'm not that unusual. And authors love to meet people. Authors would love to meet you guys from Kobo. I mean, that would thrill them. So you have to know that you're welcome and wanted, and that we're all just trying to make connections the best way we can. I've made author connections by going to my publishers' parties, being dragged to my publisher parties. I usually don't want to go. My editor will call me at the last minute and say, get your ass downstairs. We're heading to the party. So that's what it means by being dragged to places. And, doing workshops helps, which is hard still to get up there and do a workshop, but you meet other authors that way. You can meet authors online and their reader group. We love readers, and we love people who want to connect with us. We just don't always know how to connect back.
Yeah, they're so nice. That's all. And I think if I had a question, they'd love to help me.
Yes, that's true. 99% of the authors or that you run into are at an event to meet people like you and would love to talk.
Yeah, it's a good thing for newbie authors to know, who maybe are apprehensive about going to a conference, that people are
We're
so
newbies
nice.
that we just went.
Yeah. But you know what the way to do would probably, if you're new and you're shy, maybe go to some smaller conferences first and work your way up to RWA's national conference, because they have chapter conferences and even outside of RWA, which, by the way, I think RWA has done a really good job of creating a community for romance authors, which is wonderful. But there's other ways to go to conferences as well, other genres.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's really a great way to meet people. I mean, I think I met my agent that way. I met my editor that way.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
It takes balls to
go
up to someone, right?
It does, but if you want it,
exactly,
right, you go for it. And you can make an appointment. A lot of conferences will have appointments with agents or editors, and you go there, and yeah, I almost threw up the first time I had to do it. I can still remember, oh my God, like crying beforehand. I was so nervous. And the editor was so nice and sweet. Really, if you're going to a conference and you meet someone there, they're there because they want to connect.
Exactly. No, you're completely right. I never really thought about meeting editors and cover designers so much. I thought it was
they're all available, and they want to meet you. The trick is making yourself do it. If you're as introverted as me, that's the hard part.
So a bit of a different question. This is one of my favorite questions to ask, but what motivates you professionally and then also personally?
Well, what motivated me in the beginning was needing a job. I have, there's a mortgage, there's little kids that need to be fed, and it's a job. It's not a get in your car and drive to the office sort of job, but it requires that same sort of dedication, maybe even more. It's hard to be self-motivated and to push yourself when there's no boss standing over you every day. So you really have to want to do this. It's not easy to hold yourself accountable, but I do. And I make myself goals. And so I'm driven professionally by meeting my goals and making a living at this. Personally, I love writing. So I can't imagine doing anything else. And in fact, I'm uniquely suited for almost nothing else. I can't imagine what else I could do. I mean, I went to college and I was dual major in accounting because I was working as a full charge bookkeeper. So I thought, well, if I could get my accounting degree, I'd earn more money. But I was also doing a journalism degree. So I was doing both sides and hurting my brain. But it took me a while to figure out that I wanted to do fiction, and nothing else worked for me but fiction. And that's how you feel. Then you're in the right place.
And at what point did you know that this was going to be your full-time career?
Well, in 1998, when I first started, I was pregnant and working as an accountant, and I got laid off. And because I was low man on totem pole, and it was a budget cut. So I was home for like 5 months, and I had always been such a huge reader, and I had a journalism major, and I was writing short stories and reading romance. And I decided, you know what? I have all this time before I can get a job. No one's going to hire a big pregnant chick. So I started writing. And by the time I had the baby, I was almost done with my first book. And so we figured out daycare was going to be too expensive anyway if I went back to work. So we decided one of us would work and I would stay home and write and raise the baby. Like that was going to be easy. I mean, the joke was on me because 2 very full-time jobs, but it worked out for me. And I was able to fall into it then as a job. And it was a job for me. Like I said, it was a mortgage. It was food on the table. But I loved it. And I think that if I hadn't had that love for it, it never would have worked out. Like, you really have to want this kind of a job.
I'm so impressed you were able to do that with a new baby in the house. It's amazing.
Oh, yeah, there were a lot of tears. It was nice. But like I said, it's all about what do you want? You have to want anything like this. You have to want it really bad because you're self-motivated in this job.
What keeps you motivated to keep writing every day?
Well, I do love it still, even after all these years, and still have a lot of stories to tell. So I don't think I'm going to stop anytime soon.
Great answer.
Plus, let's face it, I don't want to go back to bookkeeping.
No way. I don't think you could.
No, I doubt I could.
I was reading, I think you said like you needed a shirtless man to look at or something. And I was like, yeah, that checks out.
But you need stuff.
I do it every day. I look at covers all the time.
Yeah, that's part of the fun of the morning is finding the writing inspiration for the day, my writing inspiration pick.
How do you do that? You look at pictures?
Yeah, I go through Pinterest, I go through Tumblr. I saw last night after I finished my pages, we went and saw Hobbs and Shaw. So today I was looking at a picture of The Rock.
Amazing. So this seems like a silly question given that you just said that, but what drew you to romance?
Well, I have always read romance from the very beginning before I even thought about writing novels. That was what I read and what I loved. Yeah, so it was easy to do. I mean, I started out in high school reading romances back in the days where romances were kind of everyone's dirty little secret. So in the library, they'd be way, way in the back, uncategorized on like racks.
Wow.
And I'd go back there after high school and open my chemistry book and put a romance inside the chemistry book and pretend I was doing chemistry and I was reading romance.
I did that in school too. I got caught. My parents
You got caught?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, why would they? You're just reading.
I know.
We were supposed to be doing
Math is that's my worst skill.
Me too. So it's always been romance.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's all right. It's good to know I wasn't the only one who got caught in the library. So for me, it was always romance. Even now when I'm writing what's really essentially a bigger book and the relationships are different, there's still romance in it, or two. The Lemon Sisters that came out this summer is really the story of 2 sisters and a bunch of secrets and a bunch of years and finding each other again. But there's really 2 romances in that book. It's not just the sisters. It's a romance. It's another romance. It's a bromance. There's a bromance in there, which I love. And so I'm still telling romance, even when I'm writing bigger stories.
What elements of romantic tropes do you like to write?
I really like a second chance. You know, that maybe they screwed up the first time, or they're kids, or circumstances happened. I love bringing people back together, which is what I did in The Lemon Sisters. These kids, they were together right out of high school, and then something happened and they hadn't seen each other in 7 years. And so that was a lot of fun. There was a lot of secrets and a lot of things that hadn't been said, and seeing each other for the first time again. I love writing that stuff.
Mm-hmm. I love to read that stuff.
Well, I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah.
What prompted your progression to, as you say, these bigger stories? Was it a natural progression or?
It was, I mean, for me, I think that I'm still writing rom-com with sex, and that's what I've always been doing. But there's also other elements to it. You know, it's usually a small town. And in the beginning, my way in was category. So I was writing in the funny line at Harlequin and Silhouette. And slowly the stories got bigger and bigger. But to me, they're still the same thing at heart. It's still warm and funny and sexy and cozy at the same time. And so nothing about the tone has changed, just maybe the scope of the story has changed.
Do you find this type of story challenging?
I do. The bigger stories for sure, because now it's not just boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl. Now there's all these other threads, and maybe there's a mystery, maybe there's a suspense, or maybe there's, whatever's happening in the story. There's a lot more elements to it. So it's more complicated to plot. It takes a lot longer to write. And there's more opportunity for me because I love that not everybody has to be perfect. Not everyone is sequel bait. And I love being able to write people with flaws. I think certain flaws in certain characters can be funny or moving or bad or good. And I just love the variety. So I don't get bored. I'm still finding things new and fresh.
And what is the biggest challenge in writing romance for you?
Well, for me, because I'm writing contemporary romance, the biggest challenge is not having ghosts or goblins or vampires or zombie apocalypse or guns. There's no device to create a conflict with. The conflict has to be real between the characters. And that is a huge challenge in contemporary romance, at least for me.
Would you ever consider toying in that kind of paranormal realm of romance? Or is it not?
In a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for it to make a comeback. I've got lots of stories to tell. I played around with it very, very, you have to squint or you'll miss it. Ghost story is in Lost and Found Sisters. And if you don't believe, you won't even think of it. But if you do believe, then you know that there was a ghost in that story.
Oh.
It's subtly hidden. Cool. Lost and Found Sisters. We'll put that on our
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So what romances would you recommend that you've been loving lately? Because I feel like the genre is always changing, but what are some standouts that you think everyone needs to read?
I'm not really an authority on that because I'm in the middle of a book. I've been in the middle of a book for 4 months. And when I don't read romance. So it's hard. So I don't know what's out and current right this very minute. And also, I try really hard not to do that because then I leave out friends and I feel so bad. I feel so guilty. But I do love to read, and I recommend reading for everyone if you're trying to write or not, because there's no way to hone your craft better than reading other people's stories and understanding what works for you and doesn't work for you. I read everything. I read across the board. I'll read the back of a cereal box. I'm like this pop culture hoe. Every week I get People Magazine, Us, Entertainment Weekly, and TV Guide, and I read them all. And because I just love hearing people's stories and seeing new names, and I'm just fascinated. I'll eavesdrop on perfect strangers just to hear what they're talking about and their stories. And so I actually get inspiration from all that. And that's another good thing for someone who's trying to become a writer, is figure out where your inspiration comes from and stalk it. Within the confines of the law, of course.
I love a good celebrity gossip story. And I'm always just it's because it's a great story. You'll never know.
Yeah.
That's right. I get a lot of ideas from TV and movies and books. I love now, because we live in the mountains, so we have really bad reception. So cable is difficult. So I love Hulu and Netflix and Prime just because I can marathon and it's really fuel for the soul, I guess. It's fuel for the creativity.
Was your book turned into a movie? Did I read that correctly?
Yes. The Trouble with Mistletoe was turned into a movie by Passionflix, not last Christmas, but the Christmas before, and it's up on Amazon. You can stream it. It's also at passionflix.com. You can buy the service for a month and watch all the movies you want. You can quit anytime, or you can stay. There's no penalty for quitting if you just want to go sign up for and watch a couple of the romances that they've done and get out. And so they did one of my Heartbreaker Bay series, which was The Trouble with Mistletoe, which I think is the hardest of all of my books to turn into a movie, because that book was centered around a woman who ran a dog store. So there's a lot of animals in that movie, and I felt sorry for them. But when they were trying to film it,
were you on set while they were filming?
I wasn't. It's such a sad story. I got bronchitis and an ear infection.
Oh.
Didn't know why. And I couldn't fly to LA, so I whisked my window to go and just watch the film, but I thought they did a great job.
Were you involved in like the script process or anything?
No. Unfortunately, when you get your book option, most of the time you have to, give them the rights to everything, and that was fine. To me, it was just such an experience and such a check off of my wish list, my bucket list to get a movie made of one of my books.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Did they interpret it any differently to how you would have? Did they bring anything new, or
A little bit. I mean, it's never going to be exactly the same book. How many times have you read a book and seen the movie and thought, oh, that was perfect?
True.
So going with that caveat, they stayed pretty close to the story. They had to leave some things out. It was still a great experience, and I would do it again.
Cool.
So what are you working on right now?
So I'm finishing up another book, and it's due September 1st, so I'm kind of on deadline. And this book is, well, it's so hard to talk about the book you're writing. It's so hard, but let me tell you about the one that's going to come out. Is that okay? Okay. So I have a book coming out called Almost Just Friends in January, and that is about a woman who, in her late 20s, she had to raise her siblings, her two younger siblings, a brother and a sister, and they finally flew the coop. She's finally alone for the first time in her life, and she's not responsible for anybody. And she's going to go off and do her dream. She's going to follow her dream for the first time, and then everyone shows back up, including a dark, mysterious stranger.
Awesome. What's the name of it, did you say?
Almost Just Friends.
Almost Just Friends. Okay,
Ooh.
we'll list that on our page for readers to check out too. And is that on pre-order?
Yes.
Awesome.
The cover's not up yet, but you can pre-order it.
Very cool.
And then, so this question, you may not have an answer, but where do you hope to see yourself in the next 5 years? Or like, where do you see your career going, your writing going?
I really, really would love to be still writing these kind of bigger stories with romances in them. And I wouldn't mind, having some more films made. Would be awesome.
A Netflix series, yeah?
Yes. I mean, all that would be great. But even if that doesn't happen, I'll still be writing. I still have stories to tell.
Which one of your books do you think would lend itself best to being made into a movie?
If anyone's listening, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would depend. If they were going to do a Netflix series, I think Heartbreaker Bay would be awesome. It's set in San Francisco, and I think there's 8 books now, so there's a lot of stories to tell. I just think that'd be really cool. If it's a movie, then I wouldn't mind seeing Almost Just Friends turned in, the one I just talked to you about, turned into a movie, or The Lemon Sisters, which came out a couple weeks ago. I'm really fond of that book. I loved all the connections between all the people, and I just really loved the love story in that book and The Lemon Sisters. So that would be fun to see as a movie.
All right, so anyone listening who produces films, please take note.
We're watching. We're waiting.
I am available.
Is there a book that has changed your life, or a book that you really love?
Writing or reading?
Reading.
Or writing. We could do it both ways.
Yeah.
That might be, yeah.
Probably Lost and Found Sisters was the book I thought about the longest and the hardest, and had dreamed about writing for years and years and years before I wrote it, because I was just writing shorter, just romances, and Lost and Found Sisters is a bigger story, and my first bigger story. And so when I finally did get to write it, I just loved every minute of it, because it had been a book I'd been thinking about for a very long time. So that one sticks out for me. As far as reading, I really want to say something that has nothing to do with romance or my writing, and I want to say Harry Potter, because that was a series that hooked all of my kids on writing and reading mostly. And so for me, I have such fond memories of reading those books, those very long books with them, page by page, over and over and over again. And it really, watching kids find the love of reading from that series just stuck with me, and I'll never forget. Or I feel like I owe her this huge thank you, J.K. Rowling, for giving that gift to my kids.
Oh, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
That's so nice.
Well, I think she gave that gift to a lot of people. So
I think so too. Yeah, I think a lot of kids were influenced to read.
Yeah, I hope she feels good about that. That must be cool.
Yeah. Where can we find you on Twitter and Instagram? What's your Instagram handle?
Just twitter.com/Jill Shalvis. And if you want to see the pictures and the stories I've talked about, then Instagram.com/Jill Shalvis. And I'm on Facebook as well.
Perfect.
Awesome. We'll include those links so people
Thank you. And I have a website for anybody who wants a list. There's a book list, and you can read the first chapters of all of my books. So that's just JillShalvis.com.
Perfect. All right. We'll share all that with everyone.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. It was great to talk to you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast. If you're looking for Jill's books, links to her titles will be on the blog. And if you're interested in growing your sales, visit KoboWritingLife.com.
This episode was produced by Joni DiPlacido and Stephanie McGrath. Editing was by Stephanie McGrath. Music was by Tearjerker. And big thanks to Jill for being our guest today.
If you're ready to start your self-publishing journey today, sign up for free at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing.